The sun had barely touched the horizon of the alien city when Lady Vera walked through the grand corridors of the High Council's palace. Her long, iridescent robes flowed behind her, brushing against the polished floors that reflected the flickering lights above. She was known across her planet as one of the brightest strategists in the council, a master of diplomacy and negotiation. Yet now, with her head held high and eyes straight ahead, she felt none of her usual pride. Today she had been condemned, not by an enemy, but by her own people. The charge against her was simple yet impossible to bear: defiance. She had questioned a decision made by the council regarding the treatment of human settlers on the outskirts of their colonies. Her objections were logical, careful, and respectful, yet the council had deemed them rebellious. And in their world, rebellion could not go unpunished. Vera entered the throne room where the council waited. Their expressions were stern, unyielding. Their leader, Chancellor Ryland, spoke first. "Lady Vera, your actions have undermined our authority. Such defiance cannot go without consequence." Vera bowed slightly, keeping her voice steady. "I spoke only for fairness, for reason. I meant no disrespect." Ryland's eyes, sharp as blades, did not soften. "Your reasoning has led to a punishment most unusual but fitting. You are to be bound not to a fellow of your kind, but to a human." The word struck her like a shock. Humans. The species her people considered primitive, unpredictable, and dangerous. Humans were tolerated at best and scorned at worst, but never honored. She straightened, feeling the shock turn to indignation. "A human? You intend to marry me to a human as punishment?" Rylan inclined his head. "Yes, by your union you will be reminded of your place and perhaps learn the limits of your defiance. The human has been chosen carefully. You will leave for the settlement tomorrow. You will comply." Vera's mind raced. Marriage to a human was not merely punishment. It was a humiliation, a public statement that even the most esteemed among her people could be reduced. Her honor, her reputation, everything she had worked for would be tarnished. That night she could not sleep. The chambers that once brought her comfort now felt like a prison. The walls, adorned with intricate carvings and softly glowing crystals, seemed to close in on her. She thought of the human she would meet. What kind of creature was he? Would he understand her? Could she even tolerate his presence without showing contempt? Her pride whispered that she could not. Dawn arrived, pale and hesitant, brushing the city in silver light. She was escorted to the landing bay, where a transport awaited to take her to the human settlement. The journey through the stars was quiet, the hum of the engines filling the silence between her thoughts. When the ship descended upon the human settlement, she felt a mix of curiosity and caution. Humans lived differently from her people. Their structures were simple, functional rather than ornate. The air smelled different, heavier, infused with the sense of technology and life. He was waiting when she arrived. The human stood tall, not in the way of her people, elegant and refined, but solid and unyielding. His dark hair fell loosely around his forehead, and his eyes, a shade of green she had not expected, were steady and calm. He did not bow deeply or lower his gaze as any alien would in her society. Instead, he extended a hand. "I'm Elias," he said, his voice even, polite but not formal. "Welcome to my home." Vera recoiled slightly at his lack of ceremony. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her culture demanded deference, the display of respect in every gesture. Yet here he was, human, confident, unbent by alien protocol. She forced herself to accept his hand, her fingers brushing briefly against his. There was warmth there, unexpected, a tangible sense of presence. "This arrangement," she said, her voice measured, "is not of my choosing." "I know," he replied simply, "and I don't expect it to be easy." They walked through his home, which was small but orderly. Vera's eyes took in the human artifacts, tools, devices, simple furniture. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was meant to impress, yet somehow it was efficient, comforting, practical. She felt a strange mix of irritation and intrigue. How could he live in such simplicity yet command such confidence? Dinner was awkward. He served food unfamiliar to her, spiced, hearty, nourishing. She picked at it, unwilling to appear grateful. Yet she could not deny that it tasted good, that it filled her, that it reminded her of strength, of life outside the rigid rules she had always followed. "Why did they punish you this way?" she asked finally, unable to contain her curiosity. Elias considered her question. "I think they underestimated humans. They think we are weak, simple. But sometimes the punishment they design for control can backfire. You might learn more from me than from anyone in your council." Vera's brow arched. "And what do you think of me?" He looked at her steadily. "I think you're strong, too strong to be punished by rules alone." Her breath caught. She wanted to deny the sudden surge of emotion, the heat of frustration mixed with curiosity. Yet she could not. He saw her, really saw her, in a way her people rarely did. The days that followed were a trial, but not the kind she had imagined. She expected humiliation, failure, conflict. Instead, she found herself challenged in unexpected ways. Elias asked questions she had never considered. He observed carefully, then acted decisively. He solved problems in ways she would not have imagined. She watched him work, a human, and realized that his simplicity was a mask for ingenuity. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the settlement, she found herself helping him repair a broken machine. Her hands moved automatically, adjusting, connecting. He watched, guiding, patient but firm. At one point their hands brushed. The contact was fleeting, yet it sparked a shiver she did not expect. "Why do you hesitate?" he asked. I am not accustomed to humans," she said, stepping back. "I do not know your ways." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps you are more accustomed to being challenged than you think. You learn quickly, I respect that." Vera's chest tightened. Respect, from a human. The word resonated strangely in her mind, carrying weight beyond her understanding. For the first time since her punishment was declared, she felt something she had not anticipated. The faintest spark of admiration, mingled with confusion. Days turned into weeks. She discovered that living with a human required patience, attention, and adaptability. He tested her assumptions gently but firmly, challenging not her authority but her perspective. He was resourceful, brave, and calm in the face of difficulties that would have terrified anyone else. One afternoon, a sudden storm struck the settlement. Electrical equipment failed, communications were disrupted, and panic began to ripple among the human workers. Vera froze at first, unsure how to act. Elias, however, moved swiftly. He organized people, repaired the main circuits, and ensured everyone's safety. Watching him, Vera realized that this human, her supposed punishment, was capable of leadership and courage that rivaled even her own species. By the time the storm passed, she found herself sitting beside him in silence, marveling at what she had witnessed. "You make it look easy," she admitted. He shrugged, a faint grin on his face. "It is, but sometimes you do what needs to be done and you trust yourself enough to act." Vera considered his words. They were simple, yet they carried a depth that resonated with her. Perhaps this punishment was more than a humiliation. Perhaps it was a lesson, not in obedience, but in understanding, in humility, in the unexpected strength of humans. That night, she stood by the window, gazing at the alien moons, her mind restless. She thought of her counsel, her reputation, her pride. She thought of Elias, calm and capable, a constant challenge to everything she had been taught to believe. And she realized, with a mixture of fear and fascination, that her punishment had begun to change her. By the time she lay down to sleep, she understood something she had never admitted before. She was no longer sure who was truly being punished. The days following the storm became a rhythm of adaptation for Lady Vera. She had once believed her intellect and skills were unmatched, yet living alongside Elias revealed a new kind of strength, a human strength, unpolished but profoundly effective. She began noticing the subtle ways he approached problems, the patience in his hands, the steadiness in his voice. Every decision he made seemed guided by a mix of logic, instinct, and courage. One morning, Vera awoke to the low hum of machinery and the smell of heated metal. Elias was already at the central workshop, examining a piece of alien technology that had baffled her council for months. She followed, curiosity sharpening her senses. "Good morning," she said cautiously, her voice carrying the faintest trace of amusement. "I see you are already meddling with things you probably shouldn't touch." Elias looked up, smiling briefly. "Good morning. It's not meddling if it works. I'm trying to make this device more efficient. It seems underpowered for its purpose." Vera frowned, leaning over to examine his adjustments. He had made several small but precise modifications, changes that would have taken her months to consider. She felt a rush of surprise, quickly mixed with admiration. "You've improved it," she said. I didn't think it could be done this way." Elias shrugged again, calm as ever. "Sometimes you need a fresh perspective." For the first time, Vera felt the weight of her own assumptions. She had been taught to see humans as inferior, yet here was one, quietly surpassing her expectations. Her pride bristled, but it was tempered by something new: respect. Weeks passed, and Vera's schedule became entwined with Elia's daily routines. She helped organize the settlement systems, coordinated resources, and learned the rhythm of human life. Each day brought a new surprise, a new revelation. Humans were unpredictable, but in unpredictability there was genius. They found solutions she would never have considered, acted decisively when others hesitated, and adapted to challenges with an agility she could not have imagined. One evening, a messenger arrived from the council. Vera read the message silently, her expression unreadable. The council had grown restless. Rumors of her slow adaptation, her unusual closeness to a human, had reached their ears. They demanded a report, a justification of her actions and her behavior. Elias noticed her tension immediately. "You're worried," he said softly, sitting beside her. "About them." Vera nodded, her hands clasped tightly. "They do not understand humans. They believe I am weak for spending time here." "You're not weak," he replied firmly. "You're learning something they could never teach you. That counts for more than their opinions." She looked at him, astonished at the certainty in his eyes. Humans were unpolished, but their confidence, their courage, their ability to act when it mattered, these were qualities her people had dismissed for centuries. And here he was, embodying them effortlessly. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alarm. Red lights flashed across the settlement. The main energy hub had malfunctioned, threatening the power supply to the entire colony. Workers shouted in confusion, unsure how to respond. Vera froze, instinctively calculating the potential consequences. Elias, however, moved with purpose. He barked instructions, directing workers to stabilize the systems, while simultaneously checking the main console for critical failures. Vera followed, assisting where she could. She realized that in the midst of chaos, humans had a unique advantage: adaptability. Unlike her people, who relied on protocol and hierarchy, Elias trusted observation, intuition, and quick decision-making. Within minutes, the situation was under control, the hub stabilized, and the settlement safe. Vera's heart pounded with a mixture of relief and awe. "You handled that remarkably," she admitted, unable to keep the words from her lips. Elias smiled faintly. "I had help. And I've had practice dealing with unexpected problems. You're learning too, you know. Your guidance made a difference." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny the surge of emotion rising within her, but it was impossible. She was no longer merely observing him. She was affected by his presence, his competence, his quiet courage. That night she found herself awake, staring at the twin moons outside her window. Thoughts of Elias filled her mind, mingling with the fears she still carried about her council and her own pride. She had been sent here as punishment, yet now she felt something she had never anticipated: anticipation. The human, the being she had been taught to view as inferior, had sparked something within her, a curiosity, a challenge, an admiration that unsettled her carefully constructed sense of self. The following days brought further tests. A delegation from another alien colony arrived, suspicious of her actions and of her presence among humans. They questioned her, scrutinized every word and gesture, attempting to provoke her into missteps that could embarrass her publicly. Vera expected to falter. She had imagined these interactions would confirm her punishment, her humiliation. Yet Elias remained a quiet presence at her side, offering advice, insight, and occasionally subtle demonstrations of human cunning. When the delegation attempted to trap her in complex debates, Elias suggested strategies she had not considered, clever angles that allowed her to respond effectively without appearing subservient. By the time the delegation departed, Vera realized that not only had she survived the test, she had excelled. Her council would be surprised to see that the human, her supposed punishment, had strengthened her position rather than diminished it. One evening, after the delegation had left, Vera found herself walking with Elias along the edge of the settlement. The sky was painted in streaks of pink and silver, and the wind carried the scent of distant forests and technology alike. "You've changed," Elias said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "When we first met, you were cautious, proud, defensive. Now you're different. You're learning, adapting, and seeing things in ways you couldn't before." Vera hesitated, unsure how to respond. "And you? You've not changed, yet I see more of your strength every day. I underestimated humans." He chuckled softly. "It's easy to underestimate someone when you're taught to see only what you expect. You're learning to look beyond expectation. That's a skill few possess." For a moment they walked in silence, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Then Vera spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "You make everything seem simpler. And yet I know it is not simple at all. It requires courage, intelligence, and patience." "You're giving me too much credit," he replied, though his eyes betrayed the acknowledgement of truth. "No," she said firmly. "I am learning the truth. I see now that humans have strength my people do not always recognize. They survive, adapt, and overcome in ways that are remarkable." Her admission felt strange, liberating. She had spent her life adhering to the rules, to expectations, to hierarchy. Now, in the presence of this human, she glimpsed a freedom and power she had never allowed herself to consider. The next challenge came swiftly. Reports arrived of raiders, outsiders, opportunistic and hostile, approaching the settlement. Panic began to spread among the humans, and fear rippled through the colony. Vera's instincts urged caution, hesitation, and strict adherence to protocol. Elias acted immediately, coordinating defenses, reinforcing perimeters, and planning contingencies. Vera observed him, fascinated. His decisiveness inspired confidence. She found herself following his lead, assisting in ways she had never imagined, offering her knowledge of alien strategy and tactics. Together, they transformed fear into action, panic into order. By the time the raiders arrived, the settlement was prepared. They were met with resistance that surprised even the humans themselves. The raiders underestimated the combination of alien intellect and human ingenuity, and within hours, the threat was neutralized. When the danger had passed, Vera sat beside Elias once more. Her hands were dirty from work, her robes slightly disheveled, yet she felt an exhilaration she had never experienced within the gilded halls of her council. You were incredible," she said softly. Elias shook his head. "We were incredible. You were as important as anyone. Without your knowledge, we would have struggled more." She looked at him, understanding dawning. This human, the one she had been punished to marry, was not merely a companion. He was a partner, an equal in courage, intellect, and resilience. That night, as she prepared for rest, Vera reflected on the weeks that had passed. What had been designed as punishment had become an education. She had learned humility, adaptability, and respect. She had learned to see beyond the limitations of her own culture, beyond prejudice, and into the heart of true strength. And she had learned something else, something she did not yet fully understand. She was no longer indifferent to him. The admiration she had felt in fleeting moments had grown into something deeper, a recognition of worth, a spark of connection, a curiosity that could not be ignored. As the twin moons rose over the settlement, casting silver light across the quiet streets, Vera realized that her life had changed irreversibly. She had been sent as punishment, yet the punishment had unveiled possibilities she had never considered. Humans were not simple. Humans were not weak, and Elias, he was unlike anyone she had ever known. For the first time in her life, she welcomed uncertainty, embraced challenge, and felt the stirring of something unexpected, a bond that would only grow stronger in the trials yet to come. The morning air was crisp, carrying a scent of distant forests and the faint tang of technology. Lady Vera awoke with a strange sense of anticipation. The events of the past weeks had transformed her understanding of humans and of herself. Elias had become not just her companion, but her equal in intellect, courage, and resolve. Yet she knew the trials were not over. Reports had come in overnight. An external threat, larger and more dangerous than any they had faced before, was approaching the settlement. Unlike the raiders who had tested them previously, these attackers were organized, well-equipped, and intent on destruction. The settlement's survival now depended on more than clever improvisation. It demanded strategy, unity, and decisive action. Vera stood on the observation deck, gazing at the horizon where dark shapes moved against the pale light. Her heart raced, but unlike before, it was a controlled pulse, tempered by understanding and preparation. Elias joined her silently, his presence steady and reassuring. "They're coming," she said, her voice low but firm. Elias nodded. "We need to prepare. You know the settlement, the systems, and the people. I can guide them, but your knowledge will make the difference." Vera drew a deep breath. For the first time, she did not feel the weight of punishment or humiliation. She felt purpose. Together, they moved through the settlement, coordinating defenses and organizing the humans and alien advisors who had chosen to remain. Her instructions were clear, precise, and informed by both her council training and the lessons she had learned from Elias. The attack began as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the settlement. Explosions rocked the outer defenses and alarms blared. Humans and a few alien workers scrambled to respond, their fear evident. Vera's presence, calm yet commanding, brought order. Elias led the frontline efforts, guiding humans to intercept breaches and repair critical systems under fire. Vera marveled at the synchronization. The humans were learning from her, just as she had learned from Elias. Their combined efforts created a synergy that neither species could achieve alone. Every action was purposeful, every decision decisive. At one point, a breach opened in the main perimeter. Several attackers poured in, heavily armed. Panic threatened to take hold among the defenders. Vera acted instinctively, directing personnel and positioning defensive units, while Elias engaged the attackers directly, using both human ingenuity and quick reflexes to neutralize threats. Watching him move, she felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. He was no longer simply her companion or teacher. He was a partner, someone whose skill and courage she trusted completely. Together, they coordinated, adapted, and turned the tide. Hours passed, the battle raging with intensity. Vera felt exhaustion gnawing at her, but there was no time to rest. Every moment demanded focus, every decision had consequences. She realized that humans, unlike her people, thrived in unpredictability. They did not rely solely on protocol. They adapted, they improvised, they acted when the moment demanded it. By mid-afternoon, the attackers began to falter. Their organized assault could not overcome the combined force of human adaptability and alien strategic knowledge. Vera and Elias moved through the battlefield, side by side, leading reinforcements and repairing damaged systems. The settlement's defenses held. When the final attackers were repelled, the settlement was battered but intact. Silence fell over the area, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional shout of a worker checking systems. Vera sank to the ground, her robes dusty, her hands trembling. Elias knelt beside her, offering water and steadying her. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "All of us were." Vera's chest heaved with exhaustion and emotion. You were the anchor. Without you, we would have faltered." He smiled faintly. "We were a team, that's what matters." For a long moment they sat together, the weight of the battle settling into relief and reflection. Vera felt a profound shift within her. Her perceptions of humans, of strength, of leadership had been transformed. The punishment meant to humiliate her had instead revealed truths she could never have imagined. Humans were resilient, resourceful, and courageous beyond measure. In the quiet that followed, Vera realized another truth, one she could no longer deny. Her admiration for Elias had grown into something deeper, a connection forged in shared trials, mutual respect and understanding. She looked at him, seeing not the human her counsel had scorned, but a being of remarkable capability and character. Elias noticed her gaze. "You're thinking something," he said softly. "I am," she admitted, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "I am thinking that humans are not what I was taught. They are more than we expected. And you are more than I ever imagined." He reached out, placing a hand over hers. The gesture was simple, yet it carried weight, warmth, and recognition. "And you've shown me that leadership is not about position or title. It's about understanding, trust, and the courage to act. You've taught me as much as I've taught you." Vera's heart swelled with emotion she could scarcely name. The bond between them was no longer defined by punishment, duty, or expectation. It was defined by shared experience, mutual respect, and a growing admiration that neither of them could ignore. In the days that followed, the settlement began to rebuild. Vera worked alongside humans, guiding reconstruction and improving systems with insights drawn from both her alien knowledge and human ingenuity. Elias continued to teach and lead, always patient, always encouraging, always demonstrating the quiet strength that had captured her attention from the start. One afternoon, as they inspected newly repaired energy conduits, a human child approached, curious and wide-eyed. The child's laughter echoed across the courtyard, reminding Vera of the life and vitality she had once overlooked. She watched Elias interact with the child, gentle, patient, and kind, and felt a warmth in her chest that was unfamiliar yet comforting. "You see," Elias said, noticing her gaze, "they're learning from us both. They'll take what we've built and go further. That's how humans survive. They adapt, they learn, they grow." Vera nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "And they will teach us in return if we are willing to learn." As the moons rose that evening, casting silver light across the settlement, Vera reflected on her journey. She had been sent here as punishment, compelled to marry a human as a lesson in humility. Yet the punishment had become a revelation. She had witnessed courage, ingenuity, and resilience that challenged every assumption she had ever held. She had formed a bond with a human who had proven himself her equal, not through status or expectation, but through action, intellect, and heart. Her counsel might still view humans with skepticism, but she no longer did. She had seen their true strength, their adaptability, their capacity for bravery. And she had seen the most remarkable human of all, Elias, whose presence had transformed her understanding of partnership, respect, and even herself. That night she stood beside him on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. "I once believed this marriage was punishment," she said quietly. Elias glanced at her, curious. "And now?" "Now," she replied, her eyes meeting his, "I see it as the beginning of something far greater, not a punishment but a partnership. A lesson, yes, but one I would not trade for anything." Elias smiled, a rare, soft expression that reflected warmth, pride, and mutual understanding. "Then we move forward together. Whatever comes, we face it side by side." Vera felt a profound sense of peace and resolve. The challenges ahead would be many: political pressures, cultural misunderstandings, future threats, but she knew they were ready. Humans had shown her courage, resilience, and ingenuity, and she had embraced it fully. She, in turn, had offered guidance, insight, and strategic thought, and together they had achieved what neither could alone. In that moment, beneath the twin moons and the endless expanse of stars, Vera understood the true lesson of her so-called punishment. Humanity was not weak. It was strong, capable, and unpredictable in ways her people could not always anticipate. And when a human and an alien worked together, respecting one another, they could overcome any challenge. The settlement thrived, rebuilt stronger than before. Vera and Elias continued to learn from each other, their bond deepening with each day. Their story became a legend among both humans and aliens, not of punishment, but of respect, courage, and the unyielding power of partnership. And Vera, who had once been compelled to marry a human as punishment, found herself grateful for the journey, for the lessons, and for the remarkable human who had changed her life forever. The stars stretched endlessly above, silent witnesses to the alliance, the respect, and the extraordinary strength of two species united, not by decree, but by understanding, courage, and trust. And in that unity, humanity shone brighter than any council or law could ever have imagined.